Hello, friends. We're all coming unstuck over here, just so you know. Dear me. Amie, I want to start off by asking you how you are, but I also know from having just asked you that you've got one hell of a story for us. So I'm going to start by just letting everyone in on a bit of context to this episode. First of all, we will get into the topic shortly. Secondly, where Amie and I aren't at our 10 out of 10 functioning this morning. I have a very boring excuse, which is I'm just really tired. I had a bad sleep last night, like an exceptionally bad sleep. You know what happens to me? I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but if I don't go to bed or go to sleep, I should say, by like 9, maybe 9:30 if we're really stretching it. Like for context, my usual bedtime is between like I don't know, 8 and 8:30. But I have a buffer there. If I don't actually go to sleep at that first wave where I feel tired, I really struggle to get back to sleep. Sorry, to get to sleep. And what happened last night was such a, being married to your opposite kind of problem is that Bowen really, he cannot, two things he can't stand. I mean, there's more than two things, but two things I'm going to publicly share right now is having dirty feet at all, any skerrick of dirt on his feet, and then also getting into bed if the sheets are uneven or aren't like fully like stretched out across the bed correctly and evenly across both of our sides. I could not give two shits. You should see the state of the bed when he's not there. It looks like someone has performed some kind of circus routine in the bed with baby lion cubs. And I'm like, fine, I'll just get back into that. It's all bed to be. And so anyway, we got into bed last night I got into bed first. He was just taking the dog out for a wee or whatnot. I was reading in bed and then I got real tired real quickly. And he walks up the stairs and he pops his head and he's just like, oh, just so you know, we're going to have to fix those sheets. And then he went and sat on the toilet. And as any man that goes and sits on the toilet does, it takes fucking forever. And I was like, oh, shit, like I can already feel myself going to sleep. If I don't fix the goddamn sheets right now, then he's going to come in like 1 hour's time after he finishes shitting and he's going to need to like tug at them. And then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be grumpy. So I was like, all right, I'm a big gal. I can get up. I can fix these sheets to his Capricorn 10 out of 10 liking. And I did so. It took a while. There's a lot to fixing these sheets, you know. Anyway, and then I lie back down and he comes in at that moment and I'm like, you're kidding me. Anyway, and then I just could not get to sleep because I'd given myself a second win after I had gotten back up to do these sheets. Anyway, I hope you all have sympathy for my absolutely first world problem that I've had. So that's why I'm really tired. I didn't sleep well at all. And I have opted out of coffee crutching today as much as I was really tempted to. I'm not above it, just in case anyone wants to know that, but I did avoid it this morning. And I came on and I told Amie that I was tired. And I looked at her and I was like, "Oh, you all right?" And she goes, "Oh, I've had a morning already as well." And honestly, I don't know how you come up with so many stories that are related to your bum, but here we are. So please enlighten the people of what your morning's been.
I feel like it's now just becoming a thing. First of all, I deeply, deeply sympathize with the like riding the sleep train when the sleep window is open, like into La La Land. And honestly, we didn't talk about this piece before we hit record. I feel like we had very similar events happen last night, but for different reasons. So background, I've had a terrible week anyway. Our family cat, not mine, but my parents' cat, just very short contextual story. He has survived and has come out the other side, but was diagnosed with a huge cancerous tumor, underwent it's the largest, I think, that's ever been found, potentially, and went through an enormous surgery. I basically had about 8 hours sleep and about 3 nights prior to last night. And last night I did have work to finish, but I'm like, absolutely fucking not. If I don't get a good night's sleep tonight, I'm going to be a write-off today. And so I was so good, but my husband comes home from playing pickleball. I'm similar to you, Nat. my preference is to be in bed around 8:30, asleep by 9, but also I get very excited about life. My husband's not such a get to bed early kind of guy. But what happens is I'm awake the minute the first sparrow farts in the day. So it doesn't matter what time I go to sleep, I'm always going to be waking up around 4:45, 5 a.m. So I already know if I'm not in bed asleep by 9, I'm in a bit of trouble. He doesn't get home till 10 to 10 when he's supposed to be home at 9:30. So I'm already a little pissy about that. Because he's obviously fart-assed around chatting after pickleball. I'm like, stay calm, because if I get my nervous system gets a little aggro, like I'll be awake
Yeah.
thinking about it all night. So I'm like, yeah, zen. I've already had melatonin, but you know what it's like when someone like jerks you awake as you're falling asleep? Like you get this like adrenaline and
Yes.
cortisol rush. I'd note, I've asked him repeatedly to bloody oil the shower hinges. They go every time they open. So when he gets in, when he gets out. And then for some reason unknown to me, he has to open the shower door again and close it again. And then I've got earplugs in and everything. And then, shutting and closing the bathroom door. And then he's like an absolute bulldozer when he gets into bed. So I've been disturbed by 7 or 8 times by the time he's laying
Oh
down
my
next
God.
to me. So, needless to say, I did not catch up on any sleep last night after a really terrible week. My period's just starting. I am like a nanometer close to like bursting into tears for no reason. Anyway, I'm in the shower this morning. This is circling all the way back to the bum story. I'm in the shower. I've washed my hair. The feeling of like hair on your stuck on your wet skin makes me really jumpy. Anyway, all of us long hair girlies also know the tragedy of like long hair going down your back and like lodging in your butt crack. It is not a vibe, but probably because I am so puckered, because I'm so stressed and tired, something goes in where it shouldn't go in, and I feel like I can feel something crawling out of my anus, and I'm like, I'm normally cool as a cucumber, okay? Like a bomb could go off there, someone could get hit by a car, a mirror could fall off the wall. I won't jump, like I'll handle it. I fucking scream just
We
about.
found your limit.
I found I'm at my limit today, and I almost leapt through the shower screen door. I thought I had a tapeworm coming out of my butthole. I felt like something was crawling around in my sphincter, and I was in an absolute mad panic, like dripping wet. I'm like scrambling for a makeup compact to inspect my butthole, and I've still got like wet on me and hair on me, and I'm like, I'm about to have a menti bee of all time. And it's just, I can't even see it. That was actually the worst part. I still don't know if it's a
I'm sure
tapeworm.
it's just it has to be a rogue hair. It's not a tapeworm. It cannot.
Look, I'm just going to have to repeatedly tell myself that, because I am on the verge of panic, even just entertaining the idea. But you know, when you can feel a hair, but you can't like you can't grab it and you can't feel it.
Yeah.
I just have really acquainted myself with the landscape of my sphincter in a way that I never have before. I still couldn't find it, and even now, like even just talking about it, I'm starting to get like nervous and uncomfortable, because I just don't, something doesn't feel right.
Think we need to name this for you.
Okay.
Maybe like Walter. He seems like you
Walter.
know,
Yeah.
a pretty steady guest to have around if it is a tapeworm, and he'll just in his own time make his way out and go and play bingo with the other tapeworms down at the park or something. So
Walter, he's getting an eviction notice. I don't know what I'm going to do. I, maybe it'll be tape over the butthole tonight. In naturopathic college, actually, many worms love warm milk. They taught us about sitting over a bucket of warm milk. Probably don't have time to do that today, but apparently it like draws them out.
if you
Gross.
do that, I'm staging an intervention. You can't. You've got hair up your butt still, I reckon. Or maybe it's like clumped into a. You know how sometimes hair like clumps a little bit, and then it's like a bit of a clump, and then maybe the extra hair strands are just like teasing your butthole at the same time
I
around.
don't know, but it is. I'm
I
not
really
okay.
hope when ChatGPT or like our editing app grabs some short clips, I really hope it grabs this clip for you.
Needless to say, Nat and I are feeling very fragile.
Yeah.
If I burst into tears in this episode, you'll know why.
Yeah, but everything's fine. We're okay. Everything's gonna go smoothly. And on that note, let's actually dive into today's topic, which is around, as you would have read, just strategies to avoid overeating. I will say that when we are about to dive into this episode and give some context, I am going to be speaking a little bit to my history of binge eating and overeating struggle. So if you're not in a place to hear that or hear it in a way where I'm making light of it, because that's the way I generally cope with my own history in that way, then move on. But otherwise, I thought I would just start by sharing that this is definitely something that I have struggled with at points in my life. Not so much anymore beyond like a very normal kind of human level, which I do think very occasionally. I don't know that I overeat, but maybe I would mindlessly eat on a rare occasion. But I would say at like the peak of my binge eating, it was wild. And you know, like I reckon one of my worst times was so what happens for when you do have like a binge eating disorder, at least from my personal experience, this is what I'm speaking to it from. You start off with that thing that most people would start off with I really feel like this, I'm just going to have a little bit of it, and then a little bit ends up turning into a lot, and then what I used to feel is like a rise in panic, like, oh my gosh, I've overeaten and I feel like shit, and I don't want to face the feeling that I had as to why I overate in the first place. Because usually for me back then, may not be the same for everybody, but back then I was using overeating or using eating to run away from an uncomfortable emotion that I didn't want to feel or didn't have any other tools to know how to process. So I'd eat and then I'd panic that I'd ate and then I'd just keep eating because in my subconscious mind it was like, well, as soon as I stop eating, I either have to face what I've just done, or what I did have a struggle with was bulimia. So I did used to make myself throw up, neither of which are pleasant experiences. Now, this is absolutely on the extreme end of things, and this was back in my teen years, I would say. And we're not necessarily just speaking to the extremes in this. In fact, we're probably speaking to more of you that are in that moderate, place where sometimes you just know you eat a bit too much, or it's a habit that you want to get on top of. But if you're in that extreme end, like I was, definitely these are band-aid, like practical solutions. They're not solutions that are going to get to the underlying true driver of that being a coping mechanism. So that would be my caveat to what we're going into here. But on a lighter note, or I guess wheeling it back to perhaps what I see in clinic a lot, which is maybe just moderate overeating, where it comes from a place of maybe you haven't planned correctly, maybe you are feeling a bit stressed or tired, and it starts off with, I'll just have a spoon of peanut butter from the jar. And then all of a sudden you stand there and you're like, oh, wow, a quarter of the jar's gone. And now I don't even feel like my food. And it just spirals. Amie, because you don't have a history of binge eating or bulimia, but I'm sure that you have a more, quote unquote, normal level of an experience with it. So can you speak to what your experience has been like?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, for me, it's been less about. I've had other dysfunctional ways to deal with anxiety and stress and my personal problems. By the way, it just hasn't been a food-based thing. But anytime that I've maybe not nourished myself in an ideal way, it's been several things. So, number one, growing up, I had terrible blood sugar. balance, and that was partly there was a few reasons around that. But what would happen is I would often get home from after school absolutely starving because I'd had
Mhm.
shitty processed cereal for breakfast, and then mum would pack me a really like normal lunch, but like it would be white bread sandwiches with ham, lettuce, tomato, and cheese. And the tomato would make the bread soggy. So then I would like pyrol sensory. I'd be like, oh, mushy bread. So I'd put that in the bin, and I'd have like, the lettuce leaf, the tomato, the ham, the cheese. If the fruit was bruised, which it almost always was, oh, couldn't eat that, would put that in the bin. So I'd basically
Mm.
get home from school as a teenager starving. And of course, my blood sugar was terrible. So I can't believe I used to do this, but I did one of two things. I would either open a can of condensed milk and throw in chocolate chips because my mum was like a baker, would make like chocolate chip, and I'd drink that. No wonder I had PCOS and insulin resistance. It's not a mystery in hindsight. Or I'd have a treat that like I don't know, maybe it's an English thing, was like cinnamon and sugar on toast. So you'd like mix cinnamon and white sugar,
Mm.
and you'd like
Yep.
white bread toast, butter, and then melt. Anyway, I remember once, and even then, not knowing anything about nutrition, I knew this was not right. I had 13 pieces like in a row. But of course, there's no fiber. So I didn't even really, like, it took me that much to feel full.
Yeah.
In adulthood, overeating, really the only time I'd probably kind of turn around and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that is like if I'm eating in front of a movie, like something
Mhm.
like salt and vinegar chips, like you're not listening to your body because your mind's on something else for me. And then other than that, I feel like I just don't have an emotional relationship with food that much. And I don't typically push myself past eating more. And in fact, I know I've talked about this before. I sometimes just tend to have a less of an appetite due to anxiety and probably have the opposite problem where I might undereat.
Mm.
But what I will say is anytime I've undereaten, it has sometimes rebounded, and then I've been like ravenous later once my nervous system's feeling better, and then I've maybe air quotes overeaten when really it's just my body trying to balance up the energy. But I guess looking at the spectrum of all just our experience amongst many other experiences, we can end up overeating for any number of reasons. Sometimes mindlessness, sometimes habit, sometimes poor preparation, sometimes, emotional distress that we don't have any other strategies or resources, at least in that moment, to cope with it. And for any number of those reasons, obviously we can't necessarily speak to some of those deeper, more difficult ones, but for many people, it can just be like simple mistakes that have
Mm.
simple remedies. And so hopefully today we're going to share some things that'll give you insights into maybe what's going on for you too.
Yeah. Well, I think even if we just take it to a very simple place, is even setting up your environment to be more conducive to not overeating. And when I think of that, I think of a number of things. Like, one is actually using smaller plates. That's been proven in research to have people actually eat less. So rather than having like a massive plate and your same amount of food, if you have a smaller plate but it looks like your plate has more on it, that does definitely have a psychological effect on helping you not to feel like you haven't had enough to eat, or feel like, oh, I could have a bit more because I didn't have very much. And of course, that only works if you're being present when you're eating. So that would be the other thing from, I guess, an environmental thing, is trying to eat away from distraction. And look, I am guilty of this at times as well. If I've got a really busy week, or if I'm in already quite a, I don't want to say stress state, but I'm in that mode of like, I'm in my day, I've got to get this done. Like, I always have time for a lunch break, but I can notice myself the times that I'm more inclined to eat with distraction are the days when I'm already in that state of just like, let's get shit done. And I do think that one thing that really does help is if you can actually acknowledge that you're eating. And the way that you are able to do that is take away screens, take away scrolling, like take away as much distraction as you can. And also, I think another thing that you can layer into that if you have access to it that is helpful is putting on, like, creating an eating environment. So it doesn't have to be elaborate. If you don't have time to like light a candle and like set a table or whatever it might be, that's fine. Maybe it's just that you create a, you know, a calming music collection playlist on Spotify and you listen to that while you eat. And it's a way to assist your nervous system in getting into a rest and digest state to allow you to more easily be present with what you're doing and to slow down while you're eating, because it takes time for food to enter your system, hit your stomach, for your hormones that then feed back to your brain that you are satiated, you are full, to actually kick in. And if you just rush through your meal, you miss out on that. And then you're more likely to need to go back for seconds.
Totally. I think, you know, everything you've described just there is about ensuring that you can tune into your body and listen to what it's telling you and actually eat, chew properly, swallow, you know, allow things to actually register in your body and actually have the bandwidth to hear what your body's saying about what it needs. And I think, you know, partly what you were pointing to when you opened the episode was sometimes if you're not wanting to hear the messages your body or your mind has to say, that can be a bit of a, you know, a bit of a signal with overeating that you're actually struggling with something, and you're using it to numb or distract. But certainly creating a beautiful environment, whatever that looks like, even if it's just sit down. I like closing my eyes for a minute. I used to do alternate nostril breathing, but even just 4 deep breaths with your eyes closed before you eat can be just like a nice mini reset after like a busy day or a busy chapter in your day. And by the same token, you know, you might have sat down and eaten a really nice meal, but you go up, my husband's notorious for this, just go up and have seconds and thirds because it's delicious. But not necessarily, like, it takes, I think, about 22 minutes for satiety hormones to start to like signal, once food's in the stomach, like back to the brain that, okay, we're not starving today, not today. And what that means is some of us, especially if we only have 30 minutes for lunch, or, you know, we're in a rush, for example, and we're kind of like squashing our meals between, you know, tasks, we're not giving our body the opportunity to even register that if we're properly nourished or not. And so, you know, I'm sure parents teach their kids this. Maybe we need to remind ourselves, but just giving yourself 5 minutes after you've finished, you know, a healthy, nourishing, adequate sized meal, and before you go, like, do I want seconds? I wish I Googled it actually. There's a Japanese word and it means I eat because my mouth is lonely. And what it really means is sometimes we're eating because the stomach's empty and needs food, and sometimes it's just our mouth wants to taste something. So, you know, just beware of, like, is it your body going, actually, I need more nourishment, or is it your mouth going, that was delicious, can we chew on some more, please?
I just looked it up. Kushisabishi? Abishi. Is that what it is? My mouth is lonely.
My mouth is lonely.
Okay.
Don't let your mouth get lonely. I think some people like go and brush their teeth or maybe chew gum as a way of like getting around that. But also, side note, I think we're going to touch on this again shortly, but also just making sure, like, try and make your meals and snacks, if you have snacks, interesting and nourishing and tasty and visually appealing when you've got the time, because we are nourished by food throughout all of our senses. And sometimes I think if we're feeling undernourished in certain areas, we're going to try and seek that through food. But just kind of moving on to another, I guess, extension of that is, first of all, don't like try and make food decisions when you're really hungry. If you kind of come home after a big day and you're starving, of course, you're probably going to like first of all, shove things in your mouth while you cook dinner because you're so hungry. So you might effectively be eating 1.5 to 2 meals instead of just one. But also, you're likely to, overeat, make more food, reach for things that you may otherwise not just because you're running on empty. This is where meal prepping can just be an absolute godsend. And I had to really nurture my relationship and culture my relationship with meal prepping because I don't like eating the same thing. I don't really like reheated leftovers. Depends on the flavor and the texture and things like that. But I have found ways to make it work for me, and it is honestly a game changer. But also, what else can you do if your mouth is lonely? If you have, what was it again?
Wait. I need someone that speaks Japanese well to pronounce this, but
Voice note.
Kushi
Kushi sabashi.
sabashi.
Yeah. So if you've got a case of the kushi sabashis, think about what else you could do. Like, first of all, you could help your mouth feel less lonely with like a nice herbal tea or something just small to kind of close out the meal. But also you could have like an after dinner ritual, whether it's a walk, post sunset, or a bath, or a face mask, or journaling, or a bit of yoga, or something else to kind of nurture yourself in a way that's not food related. But looking at food, there's some key pieces, and I've absolutely made this mistake with my 13 slices of white bread with cinnamon and sugar on them, is that the different hormones that make us feel full and the different like receptors and the mechanics of feeling full and your body going, okay, fine, we're not going to starve today, are triggered by different macronutrients and different elements of food. And if you, like that white bread example is perfect. This is basically sugar on sugar on sugar with no fiber, no protein, maybe a little bit of fat with the butter. Maybe, if I hadn't had butter on there, who knows how many slices I might have had. It's terrifying to think, but having enough protein and fat is really important. Having enough fiber, even dehydration signals can like trigger a very similar sensation to feeling hungry. And so if you haven't been drinking enough water, maybe just hydrate first and allow your system to kind of reset a little bit before you go into that. But they would be like the chunky things underneath. And we've probably talked ad nauseum and probably will forevermore about balanced meals. But when it comes to pleasure, I feel like you're the queen of this, actually, with being creative and especially with your love of mingle, your love affair with mingle.
Yeah.
What else could we be doing that would make our meals so much better and reduce the likelihood that we're overeating?
I feel like such a contradiction sometimes because I can get into a messy bed, but I'm like, I'll be particular about other things. It's just hilarious to witness this unravel in real time. Anyway, before I go to that, the other thing I was going to add to your like great list of other things that you could do, rituals you could do to avoid like going back for seconds or adding in more snacks where you perhaps don't really need them. Is the things that have worked for me in the past sound a bit odd, but that's just who I am, is actually putting a heat pack or a wheat bag on my belly after eating and kind of making it a habit of heating it up, as I'm having dinner, and then knowing that it'll be pretty warm after I finish, or as I'm cleaning dinner up, heat it up and put it on my belly, or having a shower or brushing my teeth. It's a way of creating another, maybe the teeth sensation is not really pleasurable, but like having a shower it does hit some of those like pleasure centers of like, oh, that feels so nice, especially if it's like a warm shower. And same with the heaviness or the heat on my belly. It's a tactic and a way of giving like pleasure and reward and just an exhale that food often is the reason why we're going back to it for more beyond hunger, if it's not, distraction in a deeper way. And I also think the other thing that has really helped me over time is kind of not making it wrong to go back for seconds, but delaying it. So as you said, it takes, 20 minutes or so, 22 minutes for those real satiety hormones to kick in. And so what I used to do myself, still do at times, encourage my clients to do, is not to create like an I can't have seconds, I can't have extra, I can't have this snack, I can't have X food, but more of like, sweet, no worries, you can have that. Let's just do a couple of things prior to delay the the reaction of just like, I just want to go and get back, go and get more, versus having a chance to actually think about, is that what I really want to do, and give yourself an opportunity physiologically to catch up, but also mentally and emotionally to catch up. Because I think that if you then, and regardless of what decision you end up making, even if you end up making the decision to go back, have seconds, or hit the dessert, or whatever it might be, it's come from a place where you've actually made the choice, as opposed to just reacted to out of habit, or just subconscious patterning that you've already got there. And I think that it's easier to make peace with that than it is to kind of make peace with just having reacted without feeling like you've had any chance to actually make a informed decision. And I also think if you're struggling with something like that, as in you do find that, I am the person that grabs a few extra bites when I'm cleaning up dinner, or I feel like regardless of whether I'm hungry or not, I'm always having a snack that after the meal that I don't genuinely feel like I want or I need. I think it's really important to celebrate the small wins in making progress in that the progress, or the success, I should say, isn't in not doing the behavior. It's actually in, first of all, bringing awareness to the fact that that's your habit. And second of all, even in the delay, if you can create one, or in a reduced frequency, or I don't want to, intensity is the wrong word, but like volume of how much you overeat. And that's honestly the way that it happens. Like, there's no, like, it just does not happen where you have a habit of overeating and then you're just like, right, I decided that I'm not going to overeat anymore. Like, it's just, maybe there's a unicorn out there that has approached it that way. But for myself, for many of my clients who have struggled with this, it's often a few steps forward, a step back, a few steps forward, a step back, a bit of stagnation, a few steps forward. And that's normal. Like, it's normal. And I think the more rules and the more restriction and kind of cutthroatness that you create around it, the more likely you are to feel anxiety and then use food to distract yourself from the fact that it just feels like too much pressure to be that perfect all of the time.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's really important to approach it in a way that is compassionate, curious, gradual, progressive, as opposed to it being driven by fear or restriction or something that makes you feel smaller and more watched, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I think just getting curious about the why and like nurturing the why. And this is just a bit of a very light example, but I know that whenever I'm really, it's probably going to happen to me today, is that whenever I'm like really fatigued, really stressed, really underslept, my adrenals are like, I crave salt and vinegar chips. What I did was I had a big glass of electrolytes this morning. Shout out to Sodi. I'm going to have the other sachet later. And this is not because it matters whether I have salt and vinegar chips or not, but what I do know is that my adrenals need more support today. And if I was beating myself up about craving salt and vinegar chips, I would never have understood that actually it's a cry for help from my adrenals. It's a sign I've really absolutely blown myself up and I need more minerals. And for me, it's like I've come to a place where it used to be, it was salt and vinegar chips and Chardonnay, actually. And my husband would know I had a bad day if I texted him like, can you bring home a mini bottle of Chardonnay and a salt and vinegar chips? And so now I don't usually let myself get to the point where I'm like, I need that. I feel like that's happened maybe to me once or twice a year, which quite honestly is a Christmas miracle considering the year that I've had. But it's like when I realized what that was my body was asking for, I was like, oh, okay, I know how to support you. I've got adrenal herbs. In fact, I was just guzzling some Siberian ginseng when the episode started and also guzzling some electrolytes. Now, if I still feel like salt and vinegar chips later on, who cares? But it's like I gave my body what it really needed. And if I've done that adequately, I probably won't get that craving later. And if I still want it later and I have that, well, I'm not going to cry a river about it, but I'll probably just really beg to get a better night's sleep tonight and just duct tape my husband to the mattress at 8 p.m.
And set up like a freight train path from your anus over to his side of the bed so that the tapeworm / hair can just exit that way.
Bed. Right.
Yeah, and I actually think the other tool that really helped me, and again, this was a band-aid for me because my situation was a lot more severe than what we're talking about now, but was getting on my own side. So I used to have certain foods that I found really, I don't know if triggering is the right word, but I found it really hard not to overeat them and not to, once I started having a little bit, it was very hard for me to stop. So they're going to sound, some of them I'm sure people can relate to, others sound odd, but like I think some common ones would be things like nut butters, like peanut butter was a big one for me, or any nut butter. I really found it hard to stop at 1 tablespoon or 1 serve or whatever it was back then. And of course now it exists in my cupboards all of the time and it's fine. But back then it just felt like I was making my life harder by having something that I found really hard to not overeat in there all of the time. I kind of wanted to give myself a bit of an opportunity to build that muscle and build other resources around not using food to distract, suppress, escape, whatever it might be. And then I would bring it back in gradually. So it might be something else for you. It might be a certain chocolate. It might be, actually my other one used to be, and I still find these to be like crack to me, speaking of salt and vinegar, is the salt and vinegar Ceres rice crackers. Ooh. I swear to God, I could eat a whole packet of those so easily.
Yeah.
And it's probably just the salt and vinegar and carb combination because food scientists know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is for you, it doesn't matter. And it is a short-term solution, but it's just a way to environmentally set yourself up to be able to have more of a chance at making some traction with implementing a different habit or a different pathway to go down when you're faced with the, do I want to overeat now or do I want to choose a different behavior? And then as you were saying before around creative kind of swaps or ways to make your meals taste better, the things that I often come back to, and I think we should do a whole episode on this actually, is some creative ways to make meal variety happen easily without changing everything completely. But think about, can you create an extra texture in your meals? So like, can you add some crunch with, for example, some nuts on the salad or in your smoothie bowl or in your yogurt? Or can you add in something that is a new dressing that you haven't had for a while, even if you're still having the same protein and vegetable? Maybe you look up a new dressing to have so that it creates novelty, which generally makes us feel more satisfied with the food that we're having and less likely to then be like, well, that didn't really hit the spot, so I'm going to have something else. I also think something that works really well as like a post-meal, quote unquote, dessert, if you know, I'm not really hungry, but I just feel like a little something, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, is, and I do this often, is I'll just make like a half a cup of like a hot cacao. So just nut milk, cacao powder, hot water, and a bit of stevia. And it just hits that spot. And the other thing that it also does is it slows me down, and the sensation of smelling the cacao. Cacao is also a very like heart opening, grounding kind of medicine. and also just this sipping it slowly and giving myself the space between that and choosing to go and have dessert or choosing to go and have more food. I honestly finish it and I pretty much never feel like, oh, I still want something more unless I haven't had an adequate meal. And the reason I'm saying half a cup to a cup is just because you don't want to drink probably more than a cup or so of water that close to your meal. It's fine to have about half to a cup around your meal, but you don't want to guzzle like 500 mils of fluid right after you've had your food. It just won't allow you to digest your food as optimally. Plus, if we're talking about post-dinner, you also don't want to have lots of fluid in your system when you're going to sleep because you'll just keep waking up super consistently through the night. And then that will worsen the food cravings and your blood sugar dysregulation the next day. And then the other thing I think that is also helpful is creating some, I guess other snacks if you need them because you are genuinely hungry that still feel fun for you. And not kind of point blank avoiding all of the treats or fun foods or whatever you like to label them as, like, unless you have a medical reason to do so. And look, for some people, they do need to do that for a period of time. But if you're in a bit of a space of health maintenance or you have some wiggle room in the goals that you're working towards at the moment, I do think that having a little bit of something in there frequently takes away the head noise that can come with trying to avoid it consistently. You have to find your own line with that though, because if you are someone that at this point in your journey, if you have a little bit, you just want all of it, maybe it's not the right time for you. Maybe some of the other strategies are better fitting. But if you're someone where you're like, if I just have a little, I don't know, protein ball, homemade chocolate brownie, like dessert type thing, like a little small serve, a few times a week or even every day, and it's like 5% of my whole diet, it just allows me to stick to everything else in my nourishment plan. Go for it. I feel like you're going to come out on top.
Yes, I'm a big fan of that too. I know there's no one size fits all, and it also depends what season you're in, but I'm actually a big fan of like including treats every day. And what that does psychologically is it's not like a taboo thing that you then might overindulge in on the Sunday, which is your, air quotes, cheat day. And I just think, I understand, particularly in the sporting arena or, sports performance, there might be particular goals and a framework like that works for you. But most of us have got to where we are because of the habitual choices we make. And what we're really trying to do for long-term well-being is make sustainable habitual choices that'll get you where you want to go, but not necessarily in the quickest way possible. And personally for me, like I would have chocolate probably every day. I don't even really know because it's just not a thing that I can't have. Like I don't tell myself I have dark chocolate. I choose high quality things, but because it's available in my house all the time, or I might make a cacao and I will have something probably after dinner or maybe after lunch on a daily basis, one or the other. It's just a natural part of my diet. And it's not something that I particularly crave any more than I'd crave a steak or a juicy red grilled grapefruit. It's just in the landscape. And when we're looking at it through a traditional Chinese medicine lens, they look at the 5 elements and the flavors associated with those elements. And it's actually a complete way to eat when you tick all of those boxes. And, foods are yin versus yang, and that's a whole other subject really, but it's actually quite balanced to have some sweet, some salty, some bitter, in a meal. And for some, if they're a bit yang, they actually might want to start with something sweet, especially kids. They always want dessert before dinner. And then for adults who are more yin, overall speaking in terms of our life cycle, the yang foods are nourishing and then the yin cools us down and relaxes us at the end of the meal. And so making allowances for that, especially if you are tracking macros for any particular reason, it doesn't have to be something that's omitted. And you can, there's so many ways you can include treats. I also am a big fan of encouraging people to have, if they're having, treats could look like anything, by the way. I know someone's kid who broccoli is like the best thing they've ever eaten. So, like I don't necessarily mean chocolate when I say
That kid needs to be taken out a little bit more.
yeah, I think so. I know. Everything okay over there?
No, that's very sweet.
It's very
That's
cute.
awesome.
I mean, I'm sure I loved cheese and ham and pickles when I was two. I was really savory, much to my dad's disgust because they were his favourite foods as well. But like whatever that is, just make sure you're getting a nice balance and you're including it. You can always make healthier versions of that thing if your preference is something that's going to be problematic for your health goals over time. But the other thing is, if we're thinking about sweet treats specifically, and this is something I always look at when I'm looking at my clients' food diaries, is for the after dinner snackies. And that could be, it's often sweet, not always, and sometimes it's driven by wait till the kids are down and then we'll have naughty food that we're not giving the kids.
Yeah.
But what I say to them is try and have your treats right after dinner, like with dinner. So first of all, you've only got less room, but also the later you eat, every time we eat, we spike cortisol in the evening. That's suppressing melatonin. It's bad news for sleep, which of course then sets you up for a bad day of eating the next day. And actually, the last two things I'll say just on a practical level are related to that. I mean, I am not the poster child this week, but please get a good night's sleep. If you haven't slept well, you're more likely to overeat the next day. You're more likely to reach for higher calorie foods, whether that's sugar, fat, both. So, if you're finding you're overeating, your body's going to find energy from somewhere. And if you're not getting it recharging your batteries at night, your body's going to make you consume it in the form of food. But also don't undereat. And I think, just literally had a client this week, a tradie who, not for any emotional reason or even physical goal, but just a lack of awareness of how much fuel he actually needs to get through a work day and a physical job. He was working out fasted. He's very lean, by the way. So there's just no biological advantage to doing that, particularly because building muscle would be a better goal for him. But then he was having a smoothie for breakfast, then doing a big day on the tools out on the job, and then probably skipping meals and having more refined foods at times. And then he wouldn't necessarily overeat at dinner, although sometimes he would, but it can be a biological driver because you've underfueled yourself during the day. And I did that by accident. Beginning of last year, I was about 400 calories a day under, not realizing it. And perhaps occasionally that did maybe trigger me to overeat at times, or overeat if it was a refined food in front of me. But what I'm really saying is, if you are actually not fueling yourself properly, at some point your body is likely to try and push you to actually make up a deficit if you really haven't got the balance right. So keep those in mind.
Well, you know what's interesting on that is that, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but when recovering from binge eating and bulimia and overeating, one of my fears was, or one of my quote unquote protective strategies was to try and like fast for as long as I could during the day, because then in my mind back then I was like, well, if I just delay eating for as long as possible, then it doesn't matter if I overeat later in the day because I haven't already had so much food during the day. And of course, that's a really non-helpful thing. It's a very understandable thought process. But if I'm more so naming that here, if you are someone who thinks like that, if you're like, but as soon as I have food, then I feel like compared to when I'm fasting, I want more of it, or then I've already had breakfast and it's 7 a.m. and now there's so much more of the day where I still will have an opportunity to eat, versus just delaying and delaying and delaying and then feeling like you can have the freedom to eat quote unquote whatever you want. But I guarantee you, as someone who like beat that strategy into the ground of trying to do that, it doesn't end up helping you get to that place that you want to be at, which is ultimately to feel a sense of confidence and freedom around food. I think part of what helps you get there is exactly what you said, Ames, is actually eating enough food, eating enough protein, and starting eating at a, sensible time within the day, as in particularly for females, like having breakfast, lunch, and dinner as a minimum, and just ensuring that they are adequate in protein, adequate in calories, and that's going to differ for everybody, and adequate in fiber. Like it's amazing how much that can change someone's relationship with food and their appetite regulation, isn't it? When we just get them to have enough protein and eat at regular intervals.
Big time. It really is such a game changer, and might just be the missing link. And I think this is really where getting curious about things and trying things and figuring out how to nourish yourself in the best way possible is just probably the ultimate strategy, coming at it from what can I do to optimize my well-being. And I think we did mention this before, but if you find yourself, like, we're probably speaking more to just overeating in general here, but if you do find yourself having a moment where you are like just neck deep in a chocolate cake, I'm thinking of, there's a show called Nobody Wants This. I know you've seen it, Nat. And
do you know the second season's out?
yes. Oh,
I started watching it last night. I am just so in love with Adam Brody and Kirsten Bell as a couple.
It's a really lovely dynamic, isn't it? Like, yeah, I'm really into it too. And in it, like, if anyone isn't familiar, she's just a classic Caucasian American called a shiksa, apparently. That's what the Jewish call the white girls, the non-Jewish girls. And then Adrian Brody plays a rabbi, and, it's kind of this mixing of two worlds. And, of course, like many cultures and religions and communities, there's in strict Judaism, there's rules. Anyway, she catches the grandmother, I think, like non-kosher food or something out of the bin, like a raccoon. And I'm like, I just had that.
I used to do that
image. Like, if you find yourself like garbage gutsing like a raccoon on something.
Oh my God, guys, I actually ate it out of a red bin once.
Did you?
Like, for those international listeners, that's not your home inside your house bin. It's your bin that then goes outside in a wheelie bin to be the rest of your trash later. Oh, I've never actually said that out loud except for in therapy. But as in, like, this was back in my teenage years when I was really in my binge eating era. And because I used to bake, I used to try and bake like muffins or healthier things, but then I couldn't only eat one, and then I'd panic and I would put water on them, and then I'd go and throw them in the bin out the front, like the actual bin. But there was a couple of times where I still, despite doing that, went and ate the watered muffins from the bin. It's just so funny now. Like, not funny, but I'm just laughing at myself at just like, wow, it's amazing, like, what we can do to ourselves and what I would have done to escape feeling what I was feeling. And also, like, please, like, hopefully I'm not offending anyone who's still in that behavior or is really sensitive around that history. But it's also, I feel like, if anything, I'm a testament to the fact that like, you can totally come from literally your face and hands in a bin that's got watered down muffins to a place where I genuinely now, like, have anything could be in my cupboards or my fridge and I wouldn't overeat it like that, or wouldn't think about it when I'm laying in bed or anything. So I do think, wherever you're at along that spectrum or in that journey, there is a way to improve it. You just have to A, want to, and B, develop some resources and tools around it. And that ranges from, the depths of like therapy and really looking at why am I using food as a tool for coping with my emotions, all the way to, do I just need to break some habits that I've perhaps developed over time, and using those tools that are able to help you with that, and starting small, with, even just off the back of today's episode, what's one little goal or intention you can set for yourself. Perhaps it's that next week you're going to not scroll on your phone while you eat one of your meals, or you're going to put on some nice music at dinner time when you're eating your dinner meal, or you're going to let someone else clean up the leftovers after dinner, and you're going to brush your teeth and have a shower instead of clean up the leftovers and pick at the food. I think just setting a really little goal and celebrating that when you make progress, rather than punishing yourself for not being perfect.
Those are some really nice suggestions, especially if there is an emotional relationship with food, or you think there might be emotional triggers or emotional drivers. And maybe for the other girlies and men, if you're listening to this, well done if you've gotten through our chats about Walter and my bumhole and you're still here at the end of the episode. Maybe
they tapped out when they heard there was a tapeworm up your bum.
I'm sure they did. Do you know, I actually just remove men who follow me on Instagram. Like, there's just nothing for you here, mate. And I especially don't want you hearing my bum stories, because that's just a whole other dynamic that I'm not engaged in.
And there's too many.
It's just too many stories, too many opportunities for creeps to be interested in parts of me that they'll never be acquainted with. But anyway, back to my original thought. For someone like me who like might overeat because I'm undereating, like meal prepping my breakfasts, so when I get up in the morning I don't feel like overwhelmed with making food, or I'm like not tempted to just start work and go, oh, I'll eat later, and not. Also for me, like meal prepping lunch, hashtag wish I'd done that today, because I'm going to have to order it. I've got a very busy day, but you know, having a busy day, like just having an instant, delicious, healthy lunch to grab out of the fridge in the middle of a work day, or if you're someone who, you know, works off-site, like, you know, at a workplace, like putting on a slow cooker so you've got a beautiful, nourishing meal to have as soon as you come home, rather than rolling in the door starving, like, or even just making a note to start hydrating yourself better, you know, drinking enough water, making sure your mineral levels are good, and seeing what that does to regulate your appetite. You know, and this isn't about restricting your eating, controlling what you're eating, etc., etc. It's about setting you up to make sure that everything you consume is with intention, and that you have full, you know, autonomy over it, and that it is not something you're being driven to by something else that needs a bit of TLC.
I love it. Well, on that note, we hope you have gotten something out of this. If nothing else, then some lols. We'll keep you posted about what ends up coming out of Amie's bum, and it will be in your ear holes again next week.
Bye, everybody.